Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 387. I was white here and kicked off with e4, and my opponent played d5, the center counter defense. So I took, which is the normal move, and then he takes with the queen. And then I played d4, which is the way I often play this, although I think in looking at this with the opening book, maybe it's a mistake. If I'm going to play d4, I should probably prepare it a bit with knight f3. Knight c3, the main move, is also an interesting way to play, and I could try that sometime too. Knight c3 just kicks the queen immediately. The only reason I don't like knight c3 so much is it blocks the c-pawn, and a lot of times you can get in the move c4 with good effect in this kind of defense. So I go d4 here. But yeah, I think this is a mistake. One thing he can try here is e5, just to try and open up the center and really bust things up. After e5, he didn't play this, but after e5, knight e2 is being recommended. Maybe I can still play knight f3 here. Knight e2 looks like kind of an awkward move. You're blocking and the bishop just defending the pawn. Yeah, I guess this is playable, but black is doing fine here. And the other point of e5 is that if you take the pawn, this is actually good for black. He trades queens and then starts going after your pawn. So you've won a pawn, but he gets compensation going after the pawn, and you've lost your castling privileges. So decent position for black. So anyway, the immediate d4 here is probably a mistake. I should probably play knight f3 if I want to play with d4. Okay, but the game went this way, d4. He played c6, not taking advantage of my move, and then I play knight f3, protecting the pawn, preventing e5, bishop g4, and now, yeah, we're just out of the opening book. So I just unpin here. I want to have the queen free to retake. He goes h6, maybe a bit of a slow move, and the advantage starts to shift in my favor pretty significantly here. I start out with c4, kicking the queen. He delivers a check, I block bishop d2, and he drops back to b6. And now there's a threat here that I completely ignored. He's threatening to exchange off my knight and then grab the pawn on d4. And I just castled. And it turns out this is still okay. Even though I'm losing a pawn, he's wasted so much time. If you just look at this position, I've castled, I've got two pieces developed, and it's my turn. I'm going to develop a third piece soon, and he's only got one piece developed, and it's going to be a couple moves before he can castle. So by the usual rule of thumb for gambits, three moves of development are worth a gambit pawn. I'm ahead in that department, and the engine likes this position too. So with accurate play, queen b3 or queen e2. I played queen b3, so I start out okay. I keep the advantage for a while. He drops back. Trouble is you have to at some point get some material compensation. It's nice that I have easy development, but I seem to have a little bit of trouble converting it to a real advantage here. Just knight c3 is not the most accurate way to develop. Bishop e3 immediately kicking the queen, or bishop a5. Bishop a5 is a funny idea. Why does that work? Let's look at this. This is a tactic, huh? Bishop a5. Queen takes bishop, and queen takes b7. The vulnerability on b7. So that wins the rook in the corner. There's no way to save it. So after bishop a5, the queen has to take on b3. Okay, and it's funny, even being with the queens off, I have the bishop pair in addition to having open lines for my pieces and good development. So that's more than enough compensation for the pawn. Okay, after queen b6, I just played a routine developing move, knight c3, still keeping an edge. Knight d7, rook fe1, and now it starts to equalize a bit. Bishop e3, once again, harassing the queen and forcing something. Okay, so still we're in the range of about even, which means I still have compensation for the pawn. It's not like I'm worse in these positions, but I've given up something that I could have had here. I could have had an edge. So my plan was to expand on the queen side. I threw in these pawn moves here to kick the queen around and just try to enjoy a space advantage. He drops back to queen c7, and I get my rooks to the center and create a space for my bishop to retreat to, and also to prepare bishop f4. I noticed his queen was close to being trapped. I never really found a great way to exploit it. You'll see that with all of these moves, the engine has gradually started to like black's position. So now it's basically this sort of evaluation indicates it's just material. The bishop pair is worth about half a pawn, and then I'm down a pawn, so that's about a half a pawn advantage to black, just based on the material. So there's no great tactics on the board here. A bit of a problem with this position, so no way for me to exploit my advantage in development. And he's had time to get his pieces out. So he's just exchanging things off and hoping to go into a better endgame. And he probably should continue that policy here. If he were to just take the bishop off, rook takes, c takes, this c-pawn might even be weak in the end, and give black a target. So this move, bishop d6, was probably a mistake. Definitely a mistake, rather. So he retreated. He didn't take. And so we're still in the range of about even here, to slightly better for black. I retreated the bishop here after he played the knight up, because I felt the bishop could get exchanged off, and this c-pawn would be difficult to defend with the knight here blocking the natural defense from the rook. So I got the bishop out of the way. Puts his rook on the d-file, and I start to try and create some weaknesses over the queen side, taking advantage of my advanced pawns over here. I don't want to trade off bishops, so I avoid the trades. And now we push forward with the pawns. And right here, if he takes with the c-pawn, apparently this is pretty good for black. So c takes. Bishop takes b5. How about if I just take back? And b takes c5. Now I guess I'm losing a pawn here. The bishop has to drop back. This pawn is defended by the queen. So that's why c takes first is better. C takes, so unveiled the line from the queen to protect this pawn. And yeah, so black is winning a pawn in that line. Okay, so he took in the wrong order. He played b takes c5, which allows me to take back with the bishop. And he took over here. Once again, he should have played c takes, hitting my bishop and gaining a tempo. So I got lucky here. He really could have got the advantage here, and I managed to pretty much eliminate all the pawns. And at this point, basically I should be playing for a draw. I'm definitely worse here. He's got a compact pawn structure and good development, and I really have nothing left of my earlier advantage, which is one of those things that could happen. So anyway, we go on. This is kind of a long game, so I'm going to play through some of the moves. I thought this exchange would help a little bit in damaging his pawn structure. He just offered that exchange. And it's interesting, he could have taken back. Let's back up. After bishop takes f6, g takes f6. Is there... Oh, yeah, the knight is pinned. Yeah, so I played that at a moment when he had to take back with a pawn. So I was going to damage his pawn structure. And then I thought I saw a way to isolate a pawn or win a pawn. I don't want to actually trade here and create an isolated pawn, but if there's a way to win a pawn, then I should play that. So I play queen d2 to try and go after the knight there. He moves his king, and I get my queen out of the line of fire here. Queen a5 and queen b7, hitting the knight from this diagonal. So now I've got three pieces, and I think I'm going to pick up the pawn. But he comes up with a very good defense here. So I go ahead with my plan to win a pawn. I take, he takes, I take. And then instead of taking back right away, what he does is he checks. And checks again and takes with the queen. So so I don't get my pawn, and I don't want to exchange queens and give him a passed pawn. That would be a losing endgame. So I move my queen out of the way, and there's this dance of the queens and pawns that continues for quite a while. This game, even though the evaluation is showing -1 here, it should probably be drawn. It's just very difficult for black to advance these pawns without exposing his kings to check. So maybe it's possible, but really tough. So I expect this game would be drawn with correct play, in spite of the engine evaluation there. So anyway, we continue dancing. He's trying to advance his pawns. I'm trying to avoid creating a passed pawn. Right here I have a tactic that I could have used. I could have gone for this check and then picked up that pawn. So that would have been an immediate draw. I missed that. I just took the pawn. I still thought this was drawn. These two pawns against these three messed up pawns are not, they don't make a good impression. I don't think there's any way you can really effectively win. But the dance of the queens continues. And he does eventually push the pawns forward. It's the only way he has to make progress. And right here, this time I do spot the check. I can deliver this check. King moves up. I deliver another check. King goes here. And if he wants to escape the checks, he has to allow this check, which will allow me to grab the pawn. And right here is where I make my fatal mistake. If he came forward to protect the pawn, then I could just keep delivering more checks. So so that would be a draw by perpetual check. So he's moved his king away and allowed me to take this pawn. And I took with the queen. If I take with the pawn, then it's just completely drawn. You can see the engine. I could continue giving checks too, or I could grab with a pawn. But I thought this, well, two pawns against two pawns is a completely drawn endgame. But if you can visualize it, there's actually a real problem in this endgame having to do with the king position. And it's because my king is further away from the pawns than his king is. So watch how quickly his king gets into position. I take, and it's already losing. It's not like I played badly in the king and pawn endgame. It's just completely losing. So there's one of the traditional rules of chess that I like to quote is you should always calculate very carefully before going into a king and pawn endgame, because those, that's a very decisive. It's your final opportunity to change the course of the game. Once you've gone into a king and pawn endgame, the outcome is pretty much decided at that point. So you ought to be really, really sure before you take off the last piece and go into that king and pawn endgame. And here I just played it and said, oh, this is a drawn endgame. Well, it wasn't a drawn endgame. The point is, keeping the pieces on gives you better drawing chances when you have a lost endgame that you're going for. Okay, so I could have imagined this position after the exchange. This is the only move, and then it's Black's turn to move. And he just starts moving his king forward, and he gets here quicker than I do. So he goes forward. I have to bring my king up to defend the pawn, and he doesn't go to this square, which would probably be drawing. Yeah, king f5 would be drawing, but he keeps coming forward. He could also just push his pawn. That also wins. And I come over to try and stop him from getting in, but it doesn't matter what I do. He's already outflanked me. And he also has a tempo move, which he can take advantage of at any time. But even without that, he could have pushed that f5 immediately. There's just no way to defend these pawns. So I played on a few moves, mostly out of frustration. But I resigned here. Yeah, it's a completely lost position. So anyway, remember that before trading into that king and pawn endgame that you think is drawn or winning or whatever. You better make really, really sure it's what you think it is. Okay, hope you guys enjoyed that. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.